There's a moment, a quiet, nearly invisible pause, right after someone calls you out, accuses you, questions your worth, your intentions, or your character. In that instant, most people do exactly what they've been trained to do their entire lives. They defend themselves. I didn't mean it. That's not what I was trying to say. You misunderstood me. It sounds reasonable, even noble. But to Machiavelli, that moment is where you lose everything. Because the second you start defending yourself, you silently admit that you're weak enough to need to. And in the world of power, perception is everything. If they see you flinch, they don't see innocence. They see blood. That's the brutal law Machiavelli understood centuries ago, long before anyone else had the courage to say it out loud. The man who defends himself lowers himself. The one who doesn't forces the world to defend him instead. Let's be clear about something. Defending yourself rarely convinces anyone. What it really does is shift the power away from you. Because the moment you justify your actions, you step onto their battlefield. You start playing by their rules, and without realizing it, you hand them the authority to judge you. You silently say, "Yes, you have the right to question me." And the moment they have that, they own the narrative. Even if you're completely right, you still look guilty, because only the weak rush to explain. The strong don't. They let silence burn. They let the accusation hang in the air, untouched. Because they understand something simple. The real move isn't to defend, it's to mirror. Turn the accusation back at them. Make them doubt their own tone, their own words, their own emotions. Make them look unbalanced, petty, emotional. Because the one who speaks first almost always loses control of the frame. And in any power game, whoever controls the frame controls the outcome. Most people defend themselves because they want to be understood. They believe that if they just explain enough, repeat enough, clarify enough, people will see their good intentions. But that's not strategy. That's emotional weakness. You don't want to be understood. You want to be in control. Clarity is for therapy. Control is for power. And power doesn't come from being understood. It comes from being respected, feared, and untouchable. So when someone calls you arrogant, selfish, or manipulative, and your instant reaction is, "No, you don't understand," you've already lost. Because now you're reacting. You're showing that you care. You've given them control over your emotional tempo. The Machiavellian understands this. When you explain yourself, you trade mystery for approval. And mystery is what makes people cautious. Think of the most powerful people you've ever met. Not the loudest, not the friendliest, but the ones who held silence like a weapon. The ones who could make a whole room second-guess itself just by staring. The ones who, when attacked, never flinched, never rushed to explain. Machiavelli would tell you, "He who explains submits. He who stays silent forces others to fill in the blanks." And here's the beauty of it, they usually overestimate him. When you don't react, people get uncomfortable. They start doubting their own words. They search for validation. And when they can't find it, their power begins to shrink while yours grows. Because you've done something they can't handle. You made them talk to themselves. That's how you flip power. You let their accusation die in the echo of its own weakness. Imagine walking into a room. Someone throws shade, a subtle jab at your success, your attitude, maybe your past. Everyone turns to you, waiting to see what you'll do. And your move? Nothing. No defense. No snarky comeback. Not even a smirk. Just calm, collected stillness. In that moment, you become untouchable. Because now everyone else in the room is wondering, why didn't he react? Does he know something we don't? Did that attack just make him stronger? You've flipped the entire social frame not with words, but with presence. People aren't judging the insult. They're judging your reaction. And silence, when delivered with absolute confidence, is louder than any justification you could ever give. Machiavelli didn't just study politics, he studied psychology. He understood one timeless truth. Power isn't in what you say, it's in what people believe you could say, but choose not to. Now here's where it gets even colder. Sometimes you don't just ignore the accusation, you invert it. Someone says, "You're manipulative." You look at them and say, "If that's how you see it," no defense, no argument, just calm, controlled detachment. What happens next? They scramble. They were hoping for a reaction, for proof that they got to you. Instead, they're left holding their own weapon, and that's when the guilt sets in on their side. They start to wonder, did I overstep? Do I look insecure now? Did everyone see that? And the truth is, yes, they did. You just made them carry the emotional energy they tried to dump on you. You didn't even have to lift a finger. There's a point where silence becomes unbearable not for you, but for the one who expected your reaction. That's when the tables turn. They thought they were the accuser. Now, they're the one exposed, desperate for validation. And you? You've become something far more powerful than innocent. You've become untouchable. Machiavelli understood what few ever grasp. Words are not for revealing truth, they're for shaping perception. When someone attacks you, they want to drown you in emotional explanation. Because the more you explain, the less certain you appear. The more you react, the smaller you look. So instead, let them fill the silence. Watch what happens. They start repeating themselves, trying harder to convince others. They overplay. They look desperate, unstable, emotional, while you say nothing. And the crowd? They aren't listening to the words anymore. They're watching who's calm, who's rattled. That's social power. It doesn't come from being right. It comes from being untouchable. Now imagine this in a business setting. You're in a meeting. Someone subtly undermines you. They say, "I'm not sure your strategy is fully thought through," or, "He always has these bold ideas." They're baiting you. They want you to bite. What does the average person do? They lean forward, they explain, they justify. They nervously try to prove themselves, and the room smells it. But the Machiavellian operator, he leans back. He waits, maybe even smiles slightly. And if he decides to speak, it's not a defense. It's a redirect. "Let's hear your strategy then." Now, they have to perform. They have to defend. The power has shifted completely. Because silence from a confident person is accusation without words. It makes people feel small without you doing anything. That's control. And that's just the beginning. In relationships, this law becomes even more dangerous and even more powerful. Let's say your partner looks at you and says, "You don't care about me anymore." Most people panic. Their instinct is to rush into reassurance, to explain, to justify, to fix it. They start pleading, "That's not true. I've been busy. You know I love you," and on and on. But what they don't realize is that every word they speak feeds the emotional fire. They've already stepped into the frame that says they're the one being judged. The Machiavellian doesn't play that game. He doesn't dismiss the person. He doesn't argue. He lets the accusation hang in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. Then, with complete calm, he says, "That's not how I see it." Short, grounded, final, no apology, no justification. And in that one sentence, the emotional balance shifts. The accuser starts to feel uncertain. They question their own tone. They wonder, did I go too far? Because suddenly, you're not reacting to their emotion, you're containing it. In that moment, you control the emotional tempo, and whoever controls the tempo controls the frame. But there's a move that's even colder than calm. It's disappearance. Someone insults you. They post something, message you, take a jab. Don't respond. Don't block them. Don't acknowledge it. Just vanish. Your absence becomes a mirror. They start spinning stories in their head. They wonder if you saw it, if you care, if you're planning something. Their mind eats itself alive. Because the average person lives off emotional validation, even in conflict. The moment you take that away, they wither. They spiral. They talk to others. They keep mentioning your name. They try to bait a reaction, and with every attempt, they look weaker, more obsessed, more unstable, while you remain perfectly still. And that's when you win. Not because you proved anything, but because they destroyed themselves chasing your reaction. Here's where it gets truly elite. Don't just ignore attacks. Turn them into reflections of the attacker's weakness. Someone calls you arrogant? Say, strange how confidence makes people uncomfortable. Someone calls you manipulative? Say, only those who can't be influenced say that. Someone calls you fake? Say, people always say that when they stop getting what they want. You didn't deny it. You flipped it. You turned their accusation into a window, showing their insecurity. Now they're the ones scrambling to defend themselves. It's not just a reversal. It's a psychological judo throw. You used their own emotional energy against them and made them collapse under it. Machiavelli would call this the turn of the blade. Never meet the sword with a shield. Let the attacker fall on his own weapon. The world teaches you to protect your reputation, to explain yourself, to clear your name. But Machiavelli saw the trap centuries ago. The moment you chase innocence, you've already admitted guilt. The true strategist doesn't chase approval. He projects calm certainty. He appears too composed to be shaken, too clear to need validation, too elevated to even care. And slowly, those who try to tear him down start looking unstable, emotional, jealous, weak. Because the more you defend yourself, the more it looks like you need to. But the more you ignore, the more dangerous people assume you are. And that assumption, that quiet uncertainty, is the birthplace of power. Most people think power is about proving yourself, proving you're right, proving you're not what they say, proving your worth. But Machiavelli would smirk at that, because the instant you try to prove anything, you've already declared that their opinion matters. And once you give them that validation, you've given them your leash. Imagine a dinner party, a group meeting, a social setting. Someone throws a casual jab at you. You always act like you know everything, or guess being humble isn't your thing. Most people freeze. They tense up. They force a laugh. Or worse, they try to smooth things over with an explanation. But in doing that, they confirm that a hit was landed. Now, everyone's watching you defend. And that alone makes the jab look true. Here's what the Machiavellian does instead. Pause. Just 2 seconds of stillness. Scan the room, not with anger, but with quiet amusement. Then, if you even decide to respond, let it be with something light and sharp. You seem emotional today. Interesting take. Or say nothing at all. Just hold eye contact with calm stillness. The attacker will start to fidget. They'll look around for validation. They'll start explaining their own joke, trying to backpedal. And suddenly, the heat of the room shifts. Away from you, and onto them. Because your lack of reaction told the crowd something far louder than words. You're not the one under judgment. They are. And in that moment, your silence isn't passive, it's power. Now let's bring this into the digital arena, where the game moves even faster. Comments, DMs, posts, call-outs, accusations. People trying to bait you into reacting. Here's the truth Machiavelli would etch into your mind. In the court of public opinion, silence can sound like guilt, unless your silence commands fear. So, what's the move? Don't defend. Don't explain. Distort. Someone says, "You're toxic." You don't post a long clarification. You don't explain. You post something like, "People always call you dangerous when they can't control you." What happened there? You didn't defend. You reframed. Now, the attacker looks bitter, emotional, obsessed. You look composed, untouchable. And the audience? They start to wonder who's really in control. That's not damage control, that's narrative control. When done right, the crowd becomes confused, and confusion is power. Because when people don't know where you stand, they hesitate to move against you. The weak chase understanding. The strong cultivate uncertainty. And that's when the game turns in your favor. Let's get even more surgical with this. There are 3 tools far more powerful than defending yourself: silence, deflection, and precision cuts. Silence is your default. It's cold, confident, and unshakable. When you use it correctly, it exposes the insecurity of others without you saying a single word. It leaves them out in the open, explaining, over-explaining, fumbling for control. And every word they say after your silence only makes them look weaker. Deflection is your redirect. It doesn't acknowledge their jab. It shifts the attention somewhere else, somewhere you control. Precision cuts are your last resort. Sharp, short truths that slice through noise like a blade. They end the game instantly. Examples. Someone says, "You're full of yourself." You respond, "Confidence upsets the insecure." They say, "You're fake." You reply, "I don't owe you authenticity." They say, "You think you're better than everyone." You answer, "No, I just don't think like everyone." See the difference? None of those are defenses. They're declarations. They don't say, "I'm not guilty." They say, "You can't touch me." That's Machiavellian energy. The refusal to plead your case. The willingness to let people believe whatever they want, while you quietly control the perception they build in their own heads. The Machiavellian never begs to be seen as good. He dares people to see him as bad, and stands taller for it. And when you refuse to defend yourself, something strange starts happening to your enemies. They become unhinged. They expected a fight. They came ready for a debate, for back and forth, for drama. But instead, they're swinging at smoke. They don't know how to handle it. So what do? They escalate. They talk more. They push harder. They try to provoke you again. And in the process, they expose themselves, their insecurities, their obsession, their lack of control. You didn't destroy them. You let their own emotions do it for you. And that's the Machiavellian endgame. You don't crush your enemies through aggression. You let their fixation on you destroy them from the inside out. Here's the irony. Most people think being misunderstood is dangerous. They think if they're not seen correctly, they'll lose respect. But the opposite is true. Being misunderstood is powerful. The misunderstood man is mysterious. The predictable man is easy to control. People who constantly explain themselves. They look desperate. People who stay calm, unbothered, misunderstood. They're feared. Machiavelli said it best. It's better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. But here's the hidden layer. It's even better to be confusing than predictable, because the confused man hesitates. He doesn't act rashly. He studies you. He gives you space. And that's all you need to control the field. So stop chasing a good reputation. You don't need one. You need a strong one. A good reputation makes people expect you to be soft, agreeable, harmless. A strong reputation makes people cautious. It makes them think twice before speaking your name. You're not trying to be liked. You're building an aura. The man who never defends himself doesn't rely on people's approval. He relies on people's uncertainty. They don't know what you're thinking. They don't know how you'll react. And that makes them hesitate. That hesitation is your protection. That's how you flip power. You stop fighting for approval, and instead, you become the storm others have to navigate. Because even your silence feels like a decision. Every look, every pause, every word you don't say becomes a move in their mind. And this is where the transformation begins. The final evolution isn't just silence, it's aura. A presence so composed, so self-assured, so secure that the world adjusts around you. Accusations evaporate before they land. Drama dies before it starts. Because people sense, deep down, that you're not someone they can shake. This kind of aura doesn't come from being emotionless. It comes from being unbothered by design. You've trained yourself to stay centered when others are triggered. You've built an inner fortress that no words can breach. Because once you stop defending, explaining, or chasing validation, you cross a line few ever reach. The line where your existence becomes your defense. Think about the people in your life who never explain themselves. They don't post long clarifications online. They don't argue in public. They don't rush to correct rumors. And yet, people respect them more. Why? Because silence in the face of accusation creates myth. It invites imagination. And when the human mind doesn't have an answer, it fills the void with strength. People start thinking, he must know something I don't. He must be dangerous. He must be that confident. That's the psychology of silence. It bends perception without effort. Machiavelli didn't care about being right. He cared about being in control. And the one who never defends himself, he controls perception, even when surrounded by lies. Here's the paradox. The more you explain yourself, the more alone you look. Because when you're arguing for yourself, no one feels the need to step in. But when you stay calm and silent, something fascinating happens. People start stepping up to defend you. They say, that was uncalled for. He didn't deserve that. Why are you attacking him? He hasn't even responded. And just like that, you flipped the entire dynamic. You didn't ask for support. The crowd became your shield. That's Machiavellian leverage. You let others argue your case while you remain above the noise, composed, detached, unreadable. And while your enemies burn energy trying to prove something, you're building a reputation that grows stronger with every silence. It doesn't happen overnight. You build it slowly, stone by stone. You build it by choosing restraint over reaction, stillness over defense, presence over panic. Start with the basics. Never correct insults that are clearly meant to provoke. Let them echo unanswered. Respond to indirect shots with calm confusion, not offense. Is that how you see it? And when in doubt, close the conversation with short, controlled phrases. Noted. Okay. Think what you like. Time will tell. Each phrase closes the door. It doesn't invite more debate, it ends it. These words are quiet weapons. They don't shout your power, they demonstrate it. Study how you hold your face, your body, and your gaze, because these are your weapons now. The Machiavellian doesn't twitch, doesn't flinch, doesn't tense. Stillness is his armor. Every second of unbroken calm makes others uneasy. Because when you stay absolutely still while someone else loses control, your presence starts to expand in the room. You become gravity itself. Everything else begins to orbit around you. When people realize they can't provoke you, they start to fear you. Not because you're violent or cruel, but because you're unreadable. There's nothing more unnerving than someone who doesn't give you a script to react to. The weak seek reaction so they can predict outcomes. The powerful give none and control every outcome. You become a mirror that reflects instability back at people. They attack you, and instead of resistance, they see their own emotions staring back at them. They feel foolish, exposed, out of control. Machiavelli would say, "The most dangerous man is not the one who attacks first, but the one who never needs to." That's the highest form of power, not the ability to fight, but the ability to make fighting unnecessary. Eventually, the attacks start to fade, not because people finally like you, but because they know they'll lose before they begin. Every attempt to get a reaction from you ends the same way: silence, calm, and their own embarrassment echoing in the air. Your presence starts saying something wordless but unmistakable. I don't play defense. I let others destroy themselves while trying to reach me. There's a difference between strength and immunity. Strength still flinches, still reacts, still argues. Immunity doesn't even acknowledge the hit. Strength blocks the sword. Immunity makes the sword irrelevant. That's the Machiavellian ideal. You don't win the argument. You erase it from existence. You end it before it ever begins by refusing to enter it at all. Because when you no longer defend yourself, people stop seeing you as someone on trial. You're not another face in the crowd waiting for approval. You've moved beyond the court of public opinion entirely. The only judgment that matters is your own. From that point on, you stop living in defense. You start living in definition. You define your tone, you define your image, you define your silence. And people feel that. They feel the certainty behind your stillness, the quiet confidence in your posture, the quiet danger in your calm. You're not resisting anymore. You're commanding. And that's when the room shifts. Conversations slow down around you. The loudest voices lower themselves. Your name begins to carry a certain weight, not because you fought for it, but because you never explained it. That's the paradox of power. The less you try to prove, the more others assume. Never defending yourself doesn't mean never speaking. It means every word you choose to say becomes a move, not a response. And every time you refuse to explain, every time you hold still while the world spins around you, you transform into something the emotional cannot grasp. A man who answers to no one. Now understand this. The world will test you. It'll tempt you to react. You'll face people who poke, question, gossip, provoke, misinterpret. And the old reflex will whisper, defend yourself, clarify, explain. But that's the trap. The moment you explain, you've admitted the world's opinion matters more than your inner certainty. And once that happens, you've fallen from power back into permission, the need for others to grant you peace. Machiavelli's rule is the opposite. You grant yourself peace through indifference. This doesn't mean you ignore everything or never speak. It means you pick your battles based on impact, not emotion. When speaking moves the power dynamic, you speak. When silence does more damage, you stay silent. Most people speak to be understood. The Machiavellian speaks to direct energy. He doesn't waste words clearing fog. He shapes storms. Because in truth, you'll never control how people see you. You'll only control how they feel when they're in your presence. Defensiveness makes them feel superior. Calmness makes them feel small. And that's why stillness wins. Let's visualize it. Picture yourself in a meeting. Someone calls you out, not directly, but just enough to sting. Maybe they say, "I guess that's just your style." Or, "He's always got something to prove." Everyone looks at you, waiting. If you defend yourself, you shrink. You confirm the hit landed. If you joke back, you look like you're compensating. But if you pause, if you simply look at them, quiet, neutral, expressionless, suddenly, everyone in the room feels that shift. The tension breaks in your favor. The attacker looks emotional. The room senses you're in control. It's not what you say. It's the stillness behind it that makes people nervous. And that nervousness is respect in disguise. The Machiavellian knows something else most people don't. Even enemies protect what they fear. When you never defend, you force people to guard your image for you. They start saying things like, "Careful what you say. He doesn't respond well to that." Or, "He's not the type you can mess with." And those sentences, repeated quietly over time, build your legend. Your name becomes a story told in whispers. Not because you were loud, but because you were unshakable. Now look deeper. The art of not defending yourself isn't just a tactic for conflict. It's a lifestyle of emotional control. Every day, the world throws you opportunities to waste energy. An online comment, a misquote, a rumor, a sarcastic tone, a relative who just wants to talk. Each one is bait. And every time you take the bait, you step down from your throne to argue in the mud. But when you stay still, when you choose your silence with precision, you train the world how to treat you. They stop sending bait. They stop testing you because they know it doesn't work. You stop being reactive and start being inevitable. The man who never defends himself radiates an aura of certainty that others mistake for danger. It's not violence they fear, it's unpredictability, because unpredictable people can't be controlled. That's why Machiavelli prized silence above all political weapons. It's both shield and sword. It protects your image while piercing theirs. So practice silence like it's your craft. Let people wonder. Let them invent stories. Let them fill the gaps with their own projections. Because every theory they create about you adds another layer to your myth. Eventually, you'll notice something strange. People stop asking you to prove anything. They stop doubting you out loud. They start explaining themselves to you. That's when you flip the hierarchy completely. Now, the same people who once tried to challenge you begin to measure their words in your presence. Your silence has trained them to respect your calm. And in that silence, you hold all the leverage. Remember this: defense is reaction. Reaction is submission. But stillness is domination. In every room, every argument, every conversation, people are subconsciously looking for the emotional leader, the one whose tone defines the rhythm. If you stay calm while others get emotional, you've already become that leader. And leadership born from restraint is the rarest and most powerful kind. So from now on, let every attack become an opportunity to demonstrate control. Let every insult test your composure, not your temper. And when the world demands an answer, learn to smile just slightly and say nothing. Because in that silence, you're saying everything that matters. You're saying, "I don't explain, I define. I don't argue, I observe. I don't react, I rule." That's how Machiavelli would play it. Not through noise, not through defense. Through aura. A calm so unwavering that people start to police themselves in your presence. That's how kings operate. That's how myths are born. And that's how you become untouchable. Power built through silence isn't just about surviving conflict. It's about mastering presence. When you stop defending yourself, you no longer exist on other people's terms. You set the rhythm. You decide the narrative. You command without words. And this kind of power doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from alignment. When your inner world is so steady that no attack from the outside can shake it. From here on, your reputation stops being a reflection of what people say about you. It becomes a reflection of how they feel around you. Think of it like this. In every interaction, there are two invisible forces at play: emotional energy and control. The one who controls their emotions controls the field. Most people lose that battle instantly. They feel accused, so they justify. They feel misunderstood, so they explain. They feel disrespected, so they react. And in that instant, they've given their power away. They're no longer leading the moment. They're following someone else's frame. But the Machiavellian doesn't chase frames. He creates them. He knows that once you stop defending yourself, something strange begins to happen. People start defending you. They begin saying things like, "He doesn't even bother responding. Maybe there's more to him than we thought." Or, if he's not explaining, maybe it's because he doesn't need to. Sin. The less you say, the more they fill in the blanks. The less you clarify, the more they build your myth. That's the hidden advantage of restraint. People hate uncertainty, so they invent explanations that make sense to them. And most of the time, those explanations make you look more powerful than you really are. That's how legends form. Not through constant talking, but through consistent mystery. Every time you refuse to defend yourself, you strengthen that mystery. You let the silence speak for you. And in silence, people project strength. They imagine composure. They imagine superiority. They imagine control. Because the truth is, the human mind fills quiet with power. Machiavelli understood this psychological law better than anyone. He knew that when words are scarce, meaning multiplies. That's why the man who speaks less always appears more dominant. Because everyone assumes that if you can speak but don't, it's because you have no need to. The weak talk to prove something. The strong stay quiet to prove nothing. And the moment you internalize that, your entire energy shifts. You start walking differently. You stop explaining your motives. You stop apologizing for your standards. You stop rushing to correct every misunderstanding, because you understand that explanations are the currency of the powerless. When you explain, you're trying to buy back respect. But the powerful never pay for what they can command through presence. In the Machiavellian game, explanation is surrender. Stillness is strategy. Now imagine this in your daily life. Every room you walk into, work, relationships, social circles, you carry your silence like armor. You move slower. You speak less. You observe more. You don't rush to fill space with justification. You let others do the talking, and while they reveal their emotions, their weaknesses, their insecurity, you reveal nothing. And the less you reveal, the more you control what they see. That's the real meaning behind never defend yourself. It's not about arrogance or pretending to be above everyone. It's about understanding that control begins where reaction ends. When you stop reacting, you stop bleeding emotional energy. You become the one who decides when and how energy moves. You stop being predictable. And that unpredictability, that quiet unreadability, makes you untouchable. Because people can fight what they understand, but they can't fight what they can't read. So the more still you become, the more confused they get. The more confused they get, the more power you gain. This is what Machiavelli meant by the art of orrery, creating an atmosphere so composed, so deliberate, that people can't tell what's real and what's strategy. You're no longer playing defense. You've become the field itself. When people approach you, they adjust their tone. When they speak to you, they measure their words. And when they criticize you, they hesitate, because deep down, they know your silence is more dangerous than their attack. That's the moment you realize you no longer need to fight for power. You are power. But don't confuse this silence with passivity. The Machiavellian silence is not empty. It's strategic. Every pause, every still glance, every measured breath communicates intention. It tells people, I don't chase validation. I don't need your understanding. I don't explain my value. I embody it. That's how aura works. It speaks before you do. You see, the world teaches people to talk their way into respect, to prove their innocence, to fix misunderstandings. But the powerful understand something deeper. Words can't save your reputation. Presence does. When you're calm while others are loud, when you're composed while others scramble to explain, you start to feel untouchable, even if no one says a word, because your silence triggers something primal. Doubt. They start to doubt their own judgment. They start to doubt their tone. They start to doubt their perception of you. And once doubt enters their mind, you've already won. That's Machiavellian dominance. Winning without confrontation. Control without conflict. So, let's make this practical. Here's how you turn this philosophy into behavior. 1. Stop explaining yourself to people who've already decided who you are. They don't want truth, they want reaction. Give them neither. 2. Answer emotional attacks with neutral calm. Is that how you see it? Or noted? These phrases close doors instead of opening new arguments. 3. Use pauses as weapons. When someone expects an immediate defense, let the silence stretch. The longer it lasts, the more they unravel. 4. Build emotional distance. The less emotionally invested you are in being understood, the more others invest in trying to understand you. 5. Let absence do the work. When disrespected, withdraw your presence instead of your energy. Your silence will echo longer than any words could. Do this consistently, and over time, people will start treating you differently. They'll tread lightly around you. They'll choose their words carefully. They'll hesitate before challenging you, because you've conditioned them to respect your restraint. That's how the Machiavellian constructs power, not through domination, but through disciplined emotional control. And eventually, it stops being a tactic. It becomes your nature. You'll reach a point where silence isn't a choice. It's your state. You'll walk into chaos and remain centered. You'll hear criticism and feel nothing. You'll face misunderstanding and remain unmoved. And that's when true power feels effortless, because you'll realize that when you no longer need to defend yourself, you've already won. You've moved past needing to be liked, understood, or approved. You've entered the highest tier of presence, where your calmness defines the reality around you. From here, people no longer measure you by your words, but by your weight, your composure, your stillness, your aura. Every look becomes a statement. Every silence becomes a strategy. Every gesture becomes an order the world quietly follows. Machiavelli would call this the silent throne, the stage where power requires no motion. You no longer chase influence. Influence happens in your wake, because your silence, your calm, your refusal to defend has turned into something far greater, an atmosphere of authority. When you walk into a room, people won't know why, but they'll adjust. They'll feel the shift. They'll sense the hierarchy. And they'll realize instinctively, this is someone who doesn't explain himself because he doesn't have to. That's the end game. You're no longer reacting to the world. The world is reacting to you. And that, in Machiavellian terms, is the highest form of victory, effortless power.